Hello, everybody. Good morning. Um, yeah, it's been about a week since I streamed last. I just wanted to get some things sorted out today. If you've been here before, you know that I've been, pretty pretty open about, things that I've been going through and what I've been working on. And I kind of just wanted to get some things sorted out in my head and just get things like kind of laid out, because I have gone through a lot these past 4 years, but definitely I have gone through a lot these past 13 years. And I do plan on physically dedicating myself to writing a memoir over what I've been going through, not because I do care about me, but not because I have some kind of ego problem where where I need to like have everybody know like what's going on with me. I mean, yeah, I do care about me, but it's mostly it's mostly because I think that there's a lot that I can offer with what I've been going through, not just for trans people, because I feel like obviously it's very important for trans people to have a voice and to have representation of people that they can look up to and see like, hey, like this person made it. This person got through this insane journey that we go through. Maybe I can too. However, that is such a small part of the population. And the point of my memoir is not to just help trans people, but I want to help everybody because we all go through a transition in our lives, multiple transitions, medically, socially, spiritually, you know, not in a religious sense, but possibly, depending on who the person is. And I would like to focus my memoir on that aspect of it, on the aspect of being able to understand why we do the things we do and what effect that has on us and the people around us. Because a lot of people go through these things in various different ways. I've noticed in my own life, I've noticed in other people's lives, I've noticed in both known and unknown entities, public entities, private entities, successful entities, famous entities. There's all sorts of people that go through these things, and I feel like my memoir can offer a lot if I focus my efforts towards that narrative of, that personal transition and the mindset that you have and what I've learned through my own journey that I hopefully can share with people and that can get to enough people who need it, who need that who need that little guidance to not make the same mistakes that I've made. And obviously I have no regrets. There's things that, that I wish went differently in my life, but of course, everything that has happened in my life shaped me into the woman I am today. And there's a lot of things in my control, there's a lot of things out of my control. Particularly being transgender, unfortunately, there is a misunderstanding about who we are, about our medical journey. There is a misunderstanding about gender and what gender actually is, that is not just about trans people. And I hope with my memoir, I hope to shed light into the fact that trans people aren't the only people who experience these things. In fact, these are more universal, that affect way more people than they do us. And I actually feel like most people experience it in many more ways than us in some ways. And we all share these common factors, that it's not unique to transgender people. It's not unique to me. Like, the things I've gone through are not unique. And I would like to, I'd like to write a memoir that details everything that I've personally had to overcome. Subtracting a few personal details, I'm going to have to change the narrative a bit. Maybe kind of fictionalize it a little bit. Maybe kind of shuffle around and randomize a few things. Maybe like somewhat of a fictional, somewhat of a non-fictional memoir. Maybe I can make it into a novel and make it a character that's basically me, but not me, or it's me in a fictional world that reflects what I've gone through, in order to save the privacy, to protect the privacy of people involved. It's going to be a very difficult undertaking, because so many details of my life the past 13 years have involved people and specific events, and I wish to protect their privacy. Um, so I'd like to start with 2010, because this story goes back all the way before that, but I feel like 2010, 13 years ago, was the start of understanding myself. It was the beginning of a transition. First off, I knew I was trans probably around 2006, 2007. If I really look into it, I probably knew by the time I was 12. But functionally, I didn't know specifically what it was until I was probably 18 or so. And that wasn't until like 2006, 2007, when I had some time, when I had a little bit more independence. When I was working at a job in Taco Bell, I had a bit more independence, and I had space away from my family, space away from people who were influencing my thoughts. And I started really looking into what I need. And I knew from day one that this isn't about like some kind of gender expression. This isn't about drag. This isn't about anything like that. This isn't even about sexuality. Because I was so confused for the longest time. I did not feel like I was a gay man, but I also didn't even feel like that had anything to do with who I was. Like, I didn't even really think about sexuality that way. I kind of, looking back, I only really thought about it as far as like how other people saw me. This is part of why transitioning has helped kind of unleash my sexuality and who I am, because before, especially when I was very young and I was very confused and not really understanding of what I was feeling, what I was going through over how I felt, when I didn't understand all these things, when I was probably, going through my natal puberty, I did not understand these things. The only reason I felt like I had to be a straight guy was because of the way that I was treated at school, the way I was treated at home by boys and by girls, but mostly boys. treating me in a way where, because I was androgynous, kind of leaning on the feminine side, but also, I was pretty androgynous. And because of that, I felt like a pressure to define myself a certain way, to say, to appear masculine in order to be accepted. And so I didn't really have like a sense of like being straight or being gay or anything like that. I just felt like myself. I enjoyed school for a time. And honestly, I still enjoy school, but back then it kind of deteriorated over time because I just continued to be bullied, and I was affected by it. That was actually the key. And this is kind of where things started to change when I came out as trans, when I finally understood what this was around 2006, 2007. When I finally knew like why I felt the way I felt, that it wasn't about being gay or wanting to dress a certain way, because honestly, I dress pretty neutrally. Like as a person, as a woman, I dress pretty neutrally. I don't feel like I need to like put on a show. I don't feel like, unless I'm performing. But even, right now I don't have the resources for that so much. But I do imagine a time where I have a more professional setting. Sorry, the camera goes out. It's really annoying. I imagine a time where I have a more professional setting, where I'm going to have more access to wardrobe, to makeup, all that kind of stuff. I do not have those resources right now, but there will be a time, and I like to think that way. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, you need to be grounded in reality," but if you ground yourself in reality, you'll be stuck where reality put you. Okay, and everybody alive, everybody in the past who has made any kind of significant change in themselves or in society did not accept reality, because if you accept reality, you become stuck in where reality put you. Okay? And it's really important to remember this, because life will drive into you that you need to accept it. People will drive into you that you need to accept your situation, that it's not going to change, that you can't change. But as difficult as it is, as debilitating as it can make you feel sometimes, you cannot give up on yourself. You cannot give up on that change, no matter how many times people try to convince you otherwise. And when it feels the most hopeless is when you need to hold on to that. Because when it feels the most hopeless, that's when you're closest to accepting the way things are. And as soon as you accept that understanding of yourself, that you cannot overcome your difficulties, that you cannot overcome things, that you cannot change your life, that you cannot change your situation, that's when you start to lose. Because then you become complacent. And then you let those thoughts, those people, those negative status quo types, you let them decide your reality for you. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The things that they're telling you, you make it happen because you accept it. Now, there is a certain level of acceptance, but that does not mean that you give up on changing your situation to where it needs to be. Acceptance doesn't mean that you're okay with things. Acceptance is about understanding what obstacles are in place. And acceptance does not mean that you're going to allow those obstacles to continue to be in place. It means that you're going to understand it so that you can approach it correctly. That's what acceptance is for. But it took a long time to have these feelings, to understand what these feelings were, to understand that the way I felt about myself had nothing to do with what other people thought I was, had nothing to do with what society tells you you're supposed to be. Because for the longest time, I thought that I had to be a certain way in order to be trans. I thought that because I saw other people who were trans act and live a certain way, that meant that was going to be me. And it scared me. Not that there's anything wrong with other people. Obviously, there are cringe and even just crazy people out there. Not going to get into that. It's too many nuance and too many. It's too specific to generalize. But I saw a lot of people who were trans who came from Pride. And I don't particularly associate with Pride community. I have friends and I respect the Pride community, but I did not feel like I was a part of the flashy, like, hey, I'm here, like kind of crowd. Okay, I just wanted to be me. I just wanted to be Rebecca. And even understanding what my name was, took a very long time. In fact, it took about 11 years or so. Maybe 12 years. It took about 12 years from like 2006. No, I guess 13 years. It took 13 years. It took 13 years to understand that my name is Rebecca. Because I knew that I was trans, I did not know who I was. And what being trans meant for me until 2019. Now, fortunately, there's been a lot of advancement, and hopefully I can be a part of helping people understand that quicker. There has been a lot of discussion and a lot of advancement in understanding gender identity these past 13 years. And honestly, it took a lot of that discussion for me to finally take the leap that I needed to take. And I hope that through my life and what I have to offer and what I'm continuing to offer as I live my life, as I progress through my life and achieve whatever success I'm going to have in this lifetime, I hope that others who come after me or even my contemporaries will not have to go through as much effort as I have had to go through. Because 13 years is a long time to understand yourself, to get to your medical needs. And luckily, I've noticed a lot of young people specifically able to get there sooner. And it's not a matter of like, when you're ready, you're ready. Some people are ready when they're very young and they understand their gender identity, even as young as 3 or 4. And to put this in context, I don't want to make this into like, one of these debates, quote unquote, where people are arguing against understood science. Like gender, they call it an ideology. I don't want to get into that conversation because that goes nowhere, because you're arguing with people who don't even understand. They're still trying to get to the current understanding. I'm speaking from a place of the people who already have gotten there. The people who have already understood what gender is. Because gender is not based on biology. Gender is based on identity, and it's always has been. If you insert the Reddit meme, with the astronaut. Gender identity has always been separate from biology. And as a thought experiment, if you don't consider yourself transgender, you might not even consider yourself cisgender, which I think most cisgender people don't consider themselves that way. That's only like a denomination to separate, within conversations of gender, we use that word. And I feel like a lot of people are still not getting it. They don't get that this isn't some kind of social forcing. It's just terminology we use in order to talk about this. Because otherwise, what are we going to do? We have to have words that differentiate them, and we're going to use scientific words. Because why would we use any other words other than what's scientifically most accurate? Cisgender means you identify as the gender you were assigned, which most people understand probably as young as 3 or 4. You ask a young toddler at a certain point, people start forming their identity. When you're very young, all you know is I'm a baby, you don't even know you're a baby, right? You don't even know that you're a baby. You just know the reality around you. You know the people, there's faces. You don't even know what a face is yet. You don't know what a human is. You don't know who you are. But at a certain point, you start to form an identity. And it's very basic. Gender is a very basic part of identity. And you don't need to know all of this to accept trans people. You don't need to know this to accept cisgender people. You don't need to know any of this. This is just discussion, terminology that's used for the discussion of it for the people who are interested in discussing it. Which this discussion has gone back probably since the dawn of human species. And language and understanding of identity. Because identity is something so basic that it goes beyond language. That even if you don't have a word for it, you already know who you are. You don't need to study a whole bunch of gender studies to understand who you are. Because you already know by the time you're probably 3 or 4. Now, some people take longer to understand who they are. Especially trans people. Sometimes it takes us a very long time. But if I had access to the kind of understanding and acceptance that's starting to show up these days, if I had access to that kind of knowledge and that kind of acceptance, I would have understood myself a lot sooner. Because I went through my childhood completely confused, not understanding anything about who I was, because people were telling me, oh, you're gay, you're gay, you're gay. And I'm like, I don't feel gay. And I am pansexual. I am by definition gay, I guess, or queer, whatever. I don't ascribe to the whole I don't even see myself as LGBTQ. I mean, I am, because that's the category of person I am, but I don't ascribe to that culture, if that makes any sense. There's separate between denomination and between culture identity. Cultural identity, I'm a person. I'm Rebecca. That's who I am. I don't need to cling on to any culture other than the culture at large, which is diverse, which consists of people from religious backgrounds, people from, non-religious traditional backgrounds, people from non-traditional religious backgrounds, people from non-religious backgrounds, people from pride, LGBTQ backgrounds. There's all sorts of different people out there. People from different cultures speak different languages. There's a lot of diversity on this planet. And within the United States alone, there's so much diversity. In fact, this country was formed on diversity. And it came from a place of elitism, We're not going to get into that. Okay. Okay. That like this country is made up of diversity. It is fundamentally built by people who come from different places and different cultures. And it always has been. And so that's why it was so hard for me to understand who I was. Because when I thought of being gay or being trans, I associated it with a certain lifestyle, which there is a separation between pride and between being LGBTQ. Because you can be LGBTQ, but you don't have to be a part of pride. You don't have to fly rainbow flags, pride flags. You don't have to fly transgender flags everywhere you go. Some people do because that's who they are. And that's fine. They find acceptance, they find culture, they find identity within that culture, which is fine, which I think our world would be a lot better off if people stopped policing what kind of culture is acceptable or not. Because as long as you're not hurting other people, there's nothing wrong with your cultural identity. And accepting that cultural identity means that I may not understand it. I may think that it's weird, but that doesn't make it weird. That doesn't make it wrong. Having an open mind requires you to kind of take a step back from your initial reactions. And it takes a lot of personal work. And you can't expect everyone to do that. But I think our goal is to get to a place where more people understand that. So knowing all of this, I finally, at the age of 19, I finally understood that I was not male. That the body I have was something that happened in the womb, unfortunately, because our biology is just set up a certain way from birth. But the way I feel about it is that needs to be corrected. That I unfortunately had a set of biology that set my biology in motion. That set what body parts I would have, what puberty I would go through. And unfortunately, I kind of showed up to the party a bit late. I already started puberty by the time I understood that I was trans. And not only that, I didn't even start transitioning until I was 31, well past puberty. Now, I don't think puberty hit me particularly very hard. I was always pretty androgynous, and I do think maybe there is some biological factor to that. I do not want to get into that because it involves personal details about my family, but I do feel like there probably is some biological aspect in my case about my androgynous nature. That may exist in biology. I'm pretty, from what I understand, I don't think I've had like a DNA test or anything, but I'm pretty sure I'm not intersex. Not that I need to be, but there might be some kind of biological reason why things feel a lot stronger than they do. But that being said, it's not a requirement. And it's most likely the case that I just am my gender, that I am female. Not because of some biological reason, but because that's who I am. And I understood that from an early age, even though I didn't quite get it. because my experience did not line up with what my idea of that was, because I just went along with what my biology told me and what social over what people around me expected me to be, which is honestly, it's mostly fine. Most people are not transgender. 99% of people are not transgender. So, like, for most people, as long as you have the understanding that we know better now, and actually we've known better at least since the 1930s. And in fact, we've known this for a very long time, probably for thousands and thousands of years, are that humans are not that straightforward. Humans are not limited to their biology. That there are so many different types of people out there, that people understand their gender from a very early age. Even though medically we have not particularly had the ability to medically transition until around the 1930s, when we were able to synthesize estrogen. Now, I'm talking from the male to female perspective. Female to male transitioning has a different timeline, I believe. But I'm speaking from male to female. I don't want to get into this aspect of the conversation, but there is a very, very specific key factor that is repeating itself today, unfortunately, that people don't like to hear. People don't like to think about this, but just because it makes you uncomfortable doesn't make it wrong. Because it is a fact that in 1930s Germany, it was the center of gender research and a revolution, a cultural revolution, a medical revolution of gender studies, where there were transgender clinics, where people could finally become medically and socially accepted as themselves. It wasn't perfect back then, and there must have been a lot of stuff that's not written. But there was a lot of progression in the 1930s in Germany. But we all know what happened in 1930s Germany. Okay, I don't need to get into that part of the discussion. But needless to say, it set back gender studies probably by a century, because we had to start over from a place of non-acceptance. And people forgot about it. In fact, people don't always acknowledge it today. That what's happening today is exactly what was happening in 1930s leading up to the disaster. The Holocaust. Now, I don't want to get into that aspect of the conversation. It's a completely different discussion. So unfortunately, today's world, around 2008, 2010, there was not as much acceptance as there is today. There was not as much medical acceptance specifically. There was a lot more. There were a lot more barriers. There were a significant amount of barriers towards transitional healthcare, towards transgender medicine. Significant hurdles that you would have to overcome, which I didn't have access to, unfortunately. I've been poor all my life. I've never really had many financial opportunities. In fact, I've never really had any financial opportunities. And unfortunately, in 2010, there was a significant financial barrier, particularly to surgery. It would have cost me probably $20,000. And I probably would have had to go through a lot of hurdles. Um, there was also not as much social acceptance. There was not as much, I would have had to live in the shadows. And a lot of people have for a very long time in the 60s, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, 2010s. There were a lot of people who had to be pioneers of transgender medicine. I was unfortunately not strong enough to be one of those people. However, in 2019, I finally reached a place where I was strong enough, where I felt like I was finally able to face the unfaceable, the impossible situation, the thing that I had avoided doing for my entire adult life because I thought it was too hard. I thought it was impossible. I did not know how I would even save $100, let alone tens of thousands of dollars. However, in 2019, I finally made the leap and I reached out to my doctor. And I found out that, you know, going into this, I had researched a bit. Um, Going into this, I had researched a bit and I learned that the insurance I have completely covers my transitional needs for transgender medicine. And that was a game changer. It saved my life. Absolutely changed everything. Now, leading up to 2019 was kind of the beginning of the transition. And I would say 2010 was when I had started living in the homeless shelters. When I had was still clinging on to my to being trans and not pushing it down. Where I was still, I was unable to really identify as female without the access to the medical portion of it. Because to me, being female wasn't an act. It wasn't a matter of expression. It was an internal understanding of myself that involved medical needs. And because I didn't have those medical needs, I did not feel comfortable expressing myself as female. Now, whether or not that was okay or not for me, I think it was a mistake. But with if I had access to the medical care I have now, I would have done that differently. Maybe I could have fought for it more. But I try to forgive myself because I only had what I was working with. And with the resources I had available, I made the best decisions I could. And I pushed it down and I decided that it was easier to live as male. And it hurt me a lot. It really did. But also I didn't have the resources available to really be comfortable living in my body. So I forgive myself for that. And forgiveness is the huge theme of this memoir. Forgiveness for our, how we hurt ourselves in our heads. Forgiveness for the way we've treated people. And again, forgiveness for how we've treated ourselves. Because honestly, that has the most impact on how we treat others. Because you usually how we treat others is a reflection of how we treat ourselves. And if we treat other people badly, just think how badly we're treating ourselves. Because it's not that we're bad people, it's that we treat ourselves in very toxic, very painful ways. And it starts to leak out onto other people. So in order to become a better person, we have to start with treating ourselves better. Because that'll have the opposite effect, where we treat ourselves better, and that starts to reflect in the way we treat others. Leading up to 2019, I had undergone a whole bunch of progression. From 2010, I was going through homeless shelters. I felt completely hopeless. My sense of identity completely disappeared. I allowed the situation to define who I was, my environment to define who I was, because I had no choice. I was surviving. It was not a healthy environment. I was living in the shelters where I was with 100 people, and I was being influenced by the way they thought, by their ideals, which were very toxic and very life destroying. Because so many people are chronically homeless, and they're usually chronically homeless for a reason. And when you're around people who are chronically homeless, it makes you start to think like they do. And I kind of fell into it for about a year, until I finally started caring about myself enough to get myself as much as I could with the resources available away from the homeless people. Which meant I stopped going around the homeless circuit. Basically, in order to get all your resources, in order to get through the day, you were basically like kind of led like cattle through a little bit of a maze that they would kind of lead you through a corral where you would wake up at the homeless shelter, you'd have breakfast there. Or you would go get breakfast at a breakfast place that was just for homeless people, or financially unwell people. Which is great that these services exist, but when you're around all the same types of people, you start to think the way they do. And I felt constant bombardment of different ideologies, of different ways of thinking, it did give me a lot of exposure towards diverse identities, but it influenced me in a way that distracted me from what I needed to be doing in order to rise above the situation and overcome the challenges that I was facing. Because I was facing a monumental challenge, is that I needed to get myself out of the homeless shelters. And it felt so debilitatingly impossible that for a long time I actually believed that I had died and gone to hell. Some of this was influenced by the fact that the resources available were through various churches, Christian churches, Catholic churches. So a lot of that was kind of influenced by the resources available and the type of people who were around that. And it hurt me a lot, especially as a transgender person, because I got it drilled into my head that I needed to accept my biology. I had it drilled into my mind constantly that I was delusional, that I needed to just accept the way things were. I needed to push down who I was. I needed to not be who I knew I was. Now, if you subject yourself to that kind of ideology, it's extremely damaging to your well-being. It's not up to anyone to decide who I am but me. And there are certain biological realities. Now, that's separate from identity. I can accept that there are biological realities, but acceptance allows me to manipulate that there are pathways towards being able to accept that easier, to being able to accept that more easily, that there are hormones with hormone replacement therapy, that there are surgeries, that there are multiple things that I can do to feel more comfortable about the biological reality that I live with. But I was so focused on the material reality that I lived in, of overcoming an impossible situation, which, to be honest, I never really overcame. I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where I have a dad who has a place for me to live. Now, it's not ideal. It's not the environment that I need. It's his environment. Which, I could say whatever I feel about that, but that's not my business. Okay, it's not right for me. I think it's a really, really bad way to live. But that's not for me to say. It's not for me to judge. Other people are going to live their lives the way they live it, and it has nothing to do with me. However, I am lucky enough to have that situation, and I've been living in that situation since 2014. That within those 4 years of homeless shelter and couch surfing, I had a lot of help from people that unfortunately I was not able to use effectively. That I overstayed my welcome with people who were trying to help me. That I was still stuck in a way of thinking and behavior that was not conducive towards overcoming my adversity. And I kept going through the cycle of homelessness. However, I did get some help from somebody. Around 2011, and then again after I had been living with a friend who allowed me to live in their garage for about a year, I had returned to the homeless shelters. But even then, I had to get away from the homeless people. And luckily, where I live, there is a community college. And so I started putting all the stuff that I would need for the day, my laptop, my all my notebooks, what my I did get a chess set, a tournament chess set with weighted pieces, and I would go to the community college. And it didn't matter what I was doing. I just needed to be in an environment where I was not around homeless people. And yeah, there were homeless people there too, and I was homeless. So it's like, it's not that I was like escaping homelessness, but what it was it gave me a reality where I could imagine myself not being in that situation anymore. And just because my reality was one way does not mean it has to be stuck that way forever. And in order to overcome your reality, you cannot accept that your reality can't be changed. So many people will drill that into you. So many people will say you need to live in reality. You can't be delusional. It is required for you to be delusional in order to make changes. Because only a delusional person can see themselves in a different reality than what their situation has handed to them. You have to be delusional to overcome the barriers. Fake it till you make it. It's a mindset. Your material reality is so much based in so many different factors that some of which you can never control, that you can never change. But you can change the way you see yourself and the way you see your reality. That you can see it as a temporary situation that has nothing to do with you. And you have to be delusional. Because eventually it will no longer be a delusion. And then you'll have a new reality and you'll have a new delusion. But the fake it till you'll make it mindset is about yourself. It's not about your situation. Because the fake it till you make it manifesting, you can't change other people. You can't change material conditions outside of yourself. You know, if you live on the moon and there's certain physical realities. Okay, like but what you can do is you can change the way you think. You can change the way that you approach the problem. And it starts with being delusional. I know that sounds weird. And people will think you're delusional. People will think you're crazy. People will think that you're living in a fantasy. But those are the kind of people that if you listen to them, you ironically will be stuck in the situation. It doesn't mean that you don't change things. What it means is that if you are stuck in the belief that you cannot change your life, then you're going to make it a reality. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Successful people continue to approach the problem. Now, you might approach it from different angles. You might change your strategy. You might change your expectations. But at no time do you accept that your reality can't be changed. And being in the college environment, even just being in the library or in the cafe with my laptop, researching, having a Linux, environment on my laptop and just reading about computer programming and stuff like that. Even though I had no idea how I was going to make that into a job or anything like that, I just did it anyway. Because I knew that over time, even if I don't know the direction. Even if I don't know what my exact reality is going to be, I know what direction I need to go, and I know what I need to start doing. Because I know that no matter what, I need to maintain focus. And if I'm going to maintain focus, I may as well maintain focus on something that could be useful in the future. Now, whether or not I become a computer programmer was not in my mind. It kind of was, because obviously that is a potential source of income. But I was not thinking that far ahead. I was thinking, I need to be studying this. I need to be researching this. I need to get started on this. Because no matter what your goals are, you're going to have those requirements to make those steps. Having that knowledge without the goal is better than having the goal without the knowledge. And I knew that my material reality was not... If I had accepted my material reality, I would not have been able to even set those goals. So I needed to just get started doing something. Being somebody who does stuff is better than being somebody who does nothing. Who just accepts that things are never going to change. Who accepts that they are not going to amount to anything. That they're going to be stuck in poverty. That they're going to be stuck in just being nothing but a drain on society. Not that it should be required for you to contribute to society to have access to basic needs, but that's a completely different discussion. But eventually I kind of lost focus. I was doing a couple different things. I was, learning how to use a Linux environment and some basic computer programming, like with C and C++. Went between C++ and Python. And I kind of did a survey of a whole bunch of different programming languages. Looking back, I should have just focused on one language, which is honestly like the most experience I have with programming is actually C++, which is a very useful programming language. It's very difficult because there's so many libraries, but that's what makes it useful, is because you can define your own custom libraries and you can use libraries that people have built. Because it's a very modular language. Now, a lot of languages have become similar, but that's a completely different discussion because this isn't a computer programming discussion. But I flipped around between that and I was studying Japanese, which is my second language, which I have barely any practice on. And honestly, I have no real option. Like I have no real like exposure to Japanese culture outside of, just watching anime as a kid, listening to Japanese music, Japanese television. I honestly don't know if I'm ever going to be able to experience Japanese culture. Obviously, a lot of people do have a dream of traveling to Japan. Maybe I can one day. And the cultural understanding that I have of Japan is that even though there is a, somewhat bigoted attitude towards trans people and LGBTQ people in Japan, that's changing. But also the way the culture is you still like kind of have harmony. That even if you don't accept somebody internally, you accept them socially. Now, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of nuance I don't understand, but from my general understanding, oh God. from my general understanding of Japanese culture, it is based in harmony. And even though I'm transgender and that I'm not fully accepted in most parts in the world, if I were to visit Japan, as a foreigner especially, I think I would be pretty accepted, especially if I had money to spend on, a bunch of different things, uh, you know, tourism and all that. If I was traveling to Japan, I'd probably have the kind of money to, indulge, which is what I would want, really. I mean, like, if you're gonna, I mean, I think the goal should be like, I would just want to go to Japan. However, I am not in a time of my life right now where I can afford to even leave California, especially since my surgery is approaching and I'm going to have to go through a recovery process. And then I kind of need to get the ball rolling on the next phase of my life. But I do see that as part of the next phase. But I went between studying Japanese, which is my second language, which I'm not particularly fluent in. But if somebody is speaking or people are having a conversation and I'm listening, I'll understand the vast majority of what they're saying. I can somewhat parse written Japanese, for the most part. I might not be able to know every single reading of the kanji, but I understand most of the vocabulary. Even if I don't know the reading, I'll know what the kanji means. Um, so, like my conversational skills are seriously lacking. But if I'm listening to people speak Japanese, I'll understand what they're talking about. Or if I'm reading it, I'll understand the gist of what it's talking about. I then sort of transitioned into studying Mandarin Chinese and written Chinese. That was a natural transition from Japanese because Japanese uses Chinese characters. And I was fascinated with the language. And I studied it for about a year while I was homeless. And just, like I said, having the mindset that I can start something to make my life different, even without knowing where it's going to lead. At the time, I started studying Mandarin specifically because out of all the languages I thought would be useful, I thought that would be the most useful because I started steering myself away from my medical needs every single time one of the doctors asked about it because I had mentioned it to the doctors. It was in my medical file. Every single time a doctor even asked about it, just saying, hey, you mentioned you're transgender. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to do anything about that. That's too difficult. I need to get out of homelessness. And I gradually burned myself down to the ground. And I convinced myself that I was male. And I started focusing on things like I said, like the programming, like the language learning. I got sucked into the entire polyglot community, which was at the time, like there was a guy named Lao Shu 505,000, who was well known in the polyglot community, at least back in 2010, 2011. I think eventually he started doing like muscle gains kind of content. But he was a big YouTuber in the language learning community. And there was a couple other different people. And I kind of got sucked into that. I kind of got sucked into that being my only reality was language learning. And and honestly, I think that's really how things go, especially on YouTube, where I think forming something into a niche is so easy to do on YouTube, but it's like the most effective because you're focusing all your efforts into a single thing and you're able to contribute to the knowledge, the collective knowledge of the human species. And there was a very kind of isolated niche community of language learners. And there still is. I eventually fell out of that because I got away from language learning. Um, and I moved towards chess. And obviously, chess is a niche as well. And it's not, when you're in the niche, it's so easy to think that that's the only thing that exists. And in around 2012, 2013, well, really in 2011, towards the end of the language learning process, I started bringing my chess set to the college every day because I kind of like lost what my goal was because it seemed hopeless. At the time I was learning Mandarin, I actually I wanted to pursue being an interpreter. In fact, I had a goal of being an interpreter for the United Nations. I wanted to take the HSK, which is a language certification that says that it's the Hanyu Shui Ping Kanshi. Um, it's a certification that says that you're fluent or knowledgeable enough to have certification in a language, in the Mandarin language. And I was aiming to use that to go live in China, which, thinking back, that probably would have significantly changed my life in a way that honestly I have no way of knowing. And obviously, I'm glad that I was able to reach the point where I was able to start my transition. And I have no idea how that would have affected that timeline. I'm really thankful that things turned out the way they did. As difficult as it sometimes seems, as impossible as the situation sometimes seems, I am thankful for what I have. And if I had gone to China, that could have affected my life in a very, very significant way, either direction. Looking back to seeing the political situation the way it is now, I don't know if that would have particularly been a good thing for me. And maybe I would have been able to express my gender earlier, even. Starting to live my life with more financial freedom, it may have opened up a lot for me. And also, maybe I would have had resources within China. It's possible. Um, I have no idea. I have no idea how things would have turned out. Obviously, that's not how it turned out. um, I was trying to convince the homeless shelter people that I was going to school and I was studying, and they didn't see it that way. I printed out a whole forum post that was from the Chinese embassy about the pathway towards working. Oh God. About the pathway towards um working with the embassy and traveling to teach English and all that kind of stuff. They weren't buying it. Unfortunately, they had a very closed-minded way of seeing things. And they said, oh, well, you need to have a job in order to stay here or whatever. Or whatever. I, they said, oh, you need to either be going to school or have a job. And I'm like, well, I am going to school. And they're like, oh, but you're not enrolled. And I'm like, well, I'm going to school and I'm studying. I'm at the college. Like I said, they didn't see it the way I did. But needless to say, I was able to eventually just like, I kind of like lost focus. I lost motivation because I was not having any support. I did not have any support at all. Everything that I was doing was all me. I had no support from family in these endeavors. I had no support from anyone in my life. I had people who were obviously cared about me. Um, but as far as like my goals, everyone thought I was delusional. And like I said, in order to be successful, you have to be delusional. Unfortunately, I did not have the motivation to continue those things to make them a reality. And I've had to learn that the hard way. And right now I'm kind of in a transitional phase where I understand the risks of being wavering, the risks of wavering. And I'm able to kind of like readjust myself back into where I need to now. Where I understand that like if I lose focus again, it's going to negatively impact my life. Where I need to maintain the course. I need to keep going. Because it takes time. It takes a lot of effort, a monumental amount of effort. But I didn't understand that at the time. I spent a whole year doing language learning and then I kind of fizzled out. And then I just started working with the chessboard again. And I don't know, it kind of helped me because it at least I was doing something. And I was in the college, so I was like in an environment that was still away from the homeless people. And it kept me out of the homeless mindset that there could be hope for a future. I don't know what I was convinced that I would become like a grandmaster. I was studying chess every day for like 4 hours a day. I was working through the database, like, I had my laptop with the database. I was like moving the pieces, very quickly, which was recommended. It was recommended by, the late international master Jeremy Silman. He had written an article about this, about the way to train pattern recognition is to go through master games and just move the pieces on a board and do that like 100 to 500 games a day. Now I wasn't like that able to do that many, but I was doing like maybe like 25 to 50 games a day that way. Just moving the pieces on the database and moving them on the board to like just see the patterns, see the games, just see them unfold in hyperspeed. Now, a lot of people in my life who were like talking about chess and stuff said, "Oh, that's stupid. That's too fast. That's a waste of time." But am I going to listen to those people or am I going to listen to an international master? Okay, and there were obviously there's debates within the chess community of approaches. Honestly, I think the best thing to do is to just enjoy the process, because as long as you're thinking about chess, you're doing something to improve your chess. And from what I've gathered, the most important thing to do for your chess is to have pattern recognition. But this isn't a discussion on chess improvement. This is a discussion on where I was at my life was a place where I had lost all hope of having a future, but I clung on to something. I was clinging on to, I don't know exactly where this is going to bring me, but I know that I need to be doing something that if I start doing this, that it has potential to lead to something, which is infinitely better than not having anything going on at all. And I had no idea what I could be doing. At the time, I did not get my autism diagnosis until I started transitioning in 2019. But at the time, I thought I was broken. I thought, everybody around me was getting on my case. You know, like, oh, the reason you're homeless is because you refuse to get a job, because you refuse to do this or that. And I'm like, I've tried doing that. I tried getting a job. It didn't work. And then I just got stuck and I felt broken. And I'm like, well, I have to do something. I can't just accept that I'm broken. And I'm not broken. But I couldn't accept that I was broken. So I got the chessboard out every single day. I was playing chess games, like 15-minute games, or I was playing a lot of Blitz, honestly. But I was playing a lot of longer games. I would play them on the chessboard. I would make the move on the website, and then um, I would make the move on the website, and then I would make the move on the board. I would play touch move. I would not move the pieces around on the board. That is technically cheating. And obviously, there's no real way for the website to know that, but I know that. And so, like, I wanted to train as if I was playing tournaments. And in tournaments, there are very strict regulations. Okay. And I play no as if I was in that circumstance, with the mindset that I was playing with rules and regulations, because that's how I work. I have integrity. I just because someone isn't looking doesn't mean that I should, go against the regulation. I cheating destroys the integrity of the game. And also, it does nothing to actually help me improve. So I played as if I was playing over the board in a tournament when I was playing longer games. And obviously, Blitz is a bit different. I played thousands and thousands of games of Blitz. I don't know if that really helped my chess. Probably hurt it, but honestly, like what Magnus Carlsen says, as long as you're doing something with chess, you're doing something to improve it. Like, you're thinking about the game, you're seeing those patterns. And even if you don't play very well, at least you're observing, like, your opponent punishing you. So that's like, you can see the patterns. But eventually I was, I got help with my living situation a little bit. Like I said, I lived with a friend in their garage for a year, and I continued with chess the whole time, and I was doing language learning. I was doing exactly what I was doing at the college. Like, I just, I had that mindset and I had that momentum. But the same thing happened. Like, oh, you're living here, but you don't have any income. Like, why aren't you looking for work? And I'm like, well, I am working. I'm studying. And they're like, well, you can't just study. You have to do something. And I'm like, well, I am doing something. I'm studying because I'm trying to improve my reality. They're like, oh, but you need to, make money. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. And they're like, oh, you get a job. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, inherently, I knew that I couldn't do that. I can't work that way. I can try and I can force myself, but that hurts me. And as we see in around 2013, 2014, in 2014, somebody at the college decided to, give me a place to stay, a couch. And I helped one of that person's roommates with their computer, because I'm a computer person. I fixed their computer. I installed like Ubuntu on it, because their computer wasn't really working. So I just installed a Linux, and I taught him how to use it. It was like a laptop that he had basically given up on, and I recovered it for him. Might not be ideal, but at least it was something that he could use. And from there, I was just kind of like doing the same thing. Like I was just like kind of watching, like watching TV sometimes on on the laptop, and um, I was just kind of continuing. I would go back to the college during the day and do the same stuff. And this person was like, you can't live here indefinitely. And I'm like, I know, like I'm just continuing the path. Like I need to keep doing the work. I need to keep moving forward. I need to keep studying. I need to keep progressing. Because I've always had that mindset that I can't let my situation decide my path. That my path, it might not be the ideal strategy, but it was the strategy I had with the resources I had available and with the knowledge I had. And so why would I doubt myself once I made a decision? And so I continued along that path, but that person was going to go through the same cycle of, oh, well, you're not earning an income. You need to go get a job. So this person, helped me get a job, helped me fill out applications. And I went to an interview. And I was lucky enough to get a job. I think they kind of had some pity on me because I was I was like homeless and going through homeless shelter and all that. And because of this, I worked there for a while and I was helping my dad. I was like help because, he was kind of living in absolute filth. And he was just, melted into the couch. And I wanted to help him. So I, did some yard work, and I was gonna, clean out all the mold and all the stuff in the old trailer. And I was doing that for, a week or two, and, he let me move back in. Um, and I did. I cleaned the house, and then my aunt was graceful enough, to, um, was gracious, what's the word? Um, was generous. My aunt was generous enough to buy us, buy me, this trailer, um, which was put in my dad's name, even though it was for me. And I've been living here since that was 2014. So it's been 7 years or 9 years. And it's been an eternity, honestly. From 2014, I lost that job that I had, but then I got another job at Burger King, and I did my best to continue to show up, and I worked really hard because I put my all into everything that I do. And it's not even a question. It's not that I'm like, I can try to phone it in, but I honestly think it's a part of my autism spectrum. I put my all into everything that I do. That's why I knew that I can't work a minimum wage like fast food job, because when you do that, you're going to drive yourself into the ground, which is what happened every time. I would put my all into it, and I would really love it, and I would be like, I'm working really hard, but you don't get rewarded for that. And I'm like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with the bare minimum. I need to pursue something that will level up my life, something that will last and continue to upgrade my life. And it might not be that great. It might be hopeless. It might seem hopeless at the early stages, and it still kind of does. But I know that I have a big picture mindset. I'm not thinking about how things are today. I'm thinking that my actions, the things that I learn, the things that I invest myself into, they will lead to new results over time. That I will have a better life. That I will have skills and the resources available to upgrade my life. And I have never wavered from that. Not since 2010. The whole time I have been consistently focused, maybe not on a specific goal, but on the mindset that I need to focus on something and improve it and upgrade my life, not just living paycheck to paycheck. Because I cannot maintain that. I am permanently disabled in that aspect, which when I started transitioning in 2019, I got the autism diagnosis. And then in 2021, actually in 2022, I finally got my SSI. So now I get payments every month that fortunately allows me to have an income to eventually overcome my disability. However, right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be it fundamentally cannot be a fast food job, because that's not going to lead anywhere. And if it's not going to lead anywhere, I'm not going to be able to last. In fact, I can't even think about going to a job interview for that, because I already know what's going to happen. I already know that I'm going to be putting effort into it every day to show up and to maintain the job. And I'm just going to be completely drained. I'm going to burn out entirely. And then I'm either going to be fired or I'm going to quit. Because I'm autistic and I have different needs. That's part of the acceptance. That's part of my reality. Now, I could just accept that and just live on, the bare minimum of life, but I don't want to just do nothing with my life. I don't want to just sit around and watch movies and TV and play video games. Okay, I want something out of life. And so that's why, I have never lost focus on the long-term self-improvement of getting myself to a new height, to a new level where I can excel in life, where I can reach a place where I'm not just surviving, but where I'm thriving, where I can't just, maybe not like a multimillionaire, but maybe, I'd be happy on 80K to 100K a year, honestly. More than happy. In fact, I would be happy on 60K a year. I'd be happy on 40K a year, honestly, right now. But I don't have, what I'm working towards is something much bigger than a minimum wage fast food job. Something that will give me true meaning to my life. Something that will make an impact on others. That will help others get out of poverty. Get out of that cycle. So this whole transition, this medical transition, started in 2019 with the acceptance that I needed to make a decision. Either I keep going down a negative spiral of denial just because I wanted to believe that it was possible to shut down my identity, that it was possible to not be transgender because of the way transgender people are treated, because of the medical realities, because of the financial realities that are, gatekeep that. I had convinced myself that it was possible to deny myself that. But that's not reality. That I had to accept that I am transgender. And better or worse, or good or bad, that is true. And I need to do something about it. And I did. And as soon as I made that switch, I knew who I was. And I knew what my path was. And I have never wavered from that. Because that's who I am. When I make a decision, I don't waver. I go through with it. Through better or for worse. Because I know what needs to be done. That I cannot lie to myself. That I cannot convince myself just because reality says one thing. I know what reality should be. And I know that there are steps I can take to make that reality true. So when I began my medical journey, it actually started with understanding that and making the decision to move forward with it. And all the things that I've been going through, starting HRT in September 25th, 2019. Even before then, I had already made the decision that no matter what happens, I'm already started. That I decided that I cannot lie to myself. That I need to accept who I am. And within a few weeks, maybe even a week, I worked through a bunch of names. Because in the past, I had kind of not really thought about, because I had not committed to transitioning until then. In the past, I had no idea. I was like, oh, I just guess I'll just use the same name, whatever. It's gender neutral anyway. But when I decided that I need to respect myself enough to go through with what I need to do, that's when I knew who I was. When I knew that my name is Rebecca Lauren. She, her pronouns. And I am a strong and beautiful woman. I have not wavered from that truth ever. And I never will. Because I know too much now. I know that understanding my truth makes me stronger. Makes me authentic. Makes me more likely to succeed. Because I am not lying to myself anymore. I've accepted who I am. There is a strength in that. Even though the external world will push against you. I know through experience that if you try to accept that, it's going to crush you. That you might think it's easier to pretend that you can do what the world pressures you to do. That even though it seems easier, it cripples you. It makes you into a person who is broken, who is unable to even respect themselves enough to overcome the difficulties in your life. And when I made that decision to finally move forward with what I knew I needed to do, my life has only improved, and it will continue to improve. Because once you start respecting yourself, you start making decisions that reflect that. So when I decided I'm not going to run away from my identity anymore in 2019, all the rest that has happened has only been a matter of course. I already knew. In fact, I knew back in 2006, I need vaginoplasty, which there's realities around that. And thankfully, the surgery has significantly improved since then. So honestly, I have gone through a lot of pain these past 16 years. However, I am kind of thankful that I'm in a day and age. And obviously, you can't just push things away indefinitely, because you could always say, oh, well, if I waited, it'll be longer. I mean, it'll be better. Obviously medical understanding, medical technology, medicine is constantly improving. But at some point you have to make a decision for yourself. Do you want to be 60 years old just because you want to wait for medical science to improve? Or do you want to make the change now when you know that you have access to it and when you know that it's going to have successful results? I'm making that decision, and I made those decisions. From the very beginning, when I was like 18, I knew that I needed a vagina. That was never a question. I knew. Because there is a feeling of wrongness that has been in my life that I did not understand exactly what it was until I was 18, but I knew something was wrong. And as soon as I understood what that was, it changed my life forever. And like I said, those past 16 years, the reason why I had so much friction was because I understood that reality, that I needed that to happen, and I was not getting access to it. I did not have the resources for that. And when you know you need something and you get denied access to it, it hurts. But as soon as I made the decision to start and actually do the work required to get what I know I need, I have achieved those things and more. I started HRT. I got orchiectomy, which is kind of a part of HRT, really, because it it gets rid of organs that create testosterone, which means that the estrogen doesn't have to fight against testosterone production, and it relieved a lot of pain. It made a lot of physical activity a lot simpler. It's like there's nothing there that's causing pain anymore. I don't want to get into too many details, but they ached really badly because of the effects of HRT. Reducing your testosterone, they eventually die anyway. And it's painful. I mean, it's not like painful, but it's like, it's an ache. Okay. And when I got rid of those things, oh God, that was a huge game changer. And then just this year, that was a year ago, at the end of February. And this year, at the end of March, I had my facial feminization surgery. Another game changer. Now, it doesn't make me into a supermodel, although I do think I'm pretty attractive, and I think I have a lot of potential to be a model. And I am pursuing that. But there's realities to that too. And that's kind of where the future lies. It's that next step. Doesn't mean it's exactly what you want it. But I already know that once I make a decision and I start pursuing it, that things slowly begin to manifest. That the work pays off. That when you start pursuing things and you never waver from them, things start to happen. Because once I made that decision to start transitioning, I got on HRT. I got my orchiectomy. I got my facial surgery. And now my bottom surgery, the final step along my medical journey, is finally going to happen in a few months. The thing that I never thought was possible is finally happening. And you know who made that happen? Me. This broken, autistic person made this impossible thing happen. And if I can do that, who knows what else I can do? I think that was a good rough draft to that portion of my memoir or my novel or my article or whatever I'm writing. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being here along my journey these past 4 years streaming. I am making an effort to be more deliberate whenever I stream, to be more focused on achieving a goal. It's why I'm doing less casual streams of just hanging out and playing chess or whatever. I'm trying to do a lot more focused stuff off stream. Like I'm doing like, hundreds of puzzles a day, of like simpler puzzles, like, lower rated puzzles, and just doing like pins and forks and mate in one. I'm just doing those constantly every day, very focused, maybe even like just 20 minutes a day sometimes. But sometimes I do more, but I take breaks in between, and, there's other stuff I'm doing. I'm, journaling, I'm exercising, I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff IRL, and, that's kind of where I am right now. These past 4 years have been, the stream has had its up and downs. I've used my stream as a way to process everything that I've been going through. It has not been it's a means to an end. I'm not streaming to stream. I'm streaming because it's a place where I can gather my thoughts and just kind of work through a lot of the things that I've been pursuing. And it may not be apparent to everybody who's, maybe popped into my stream, or anybody who's, interacted with me over Discord or Twitter or X or whatever, anywhere on social media. A lot of people just only have a snapshot. But when things start to really go in the direction they need to go, it's going to become more and more apparent what I've been doing to more people. They're going to know why I've been doing the things that I've been doing. The people who have popped in and out, I can't really control what they think about me. Honestly, like, some people might think I'm completely delusional, but they don't know the whole picture. They don't know what I've been focusing on. They don't know what I've been working on. And I've been working on a lot. Anyway, I'm going to start my day. I got to get going. So thanks for listening. Bye-bye.